B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh v'Natzliach, Shiur Torah, Bruchim Habayim. We're back here on our Tuesday night War of Amalek series based on the writings of Rabbi Elchonon Wasserman, Omer Ani Ma'asai Lamelech. Tonight's shiur is going to be for the Refuah Shlema and Hatzlacha Rabba for Morenu v'Rabbeinu Rav Ephraim ben Shulamit, Rabbanit Sarah bat Anat, Rabbanit Levana bat Sarah, Sarah bat Levana, Ovadia ben Levana, Yosef ben Levana, Naomi bat Sarah, and Sarah bat Sarah, and all of Am Yisrael and all the righteous Noahides that continue to support and help the organization. For anyone that wants to donate and sponsor one of these lectures, you could donate on our website or sponsor one of the lectures at BeEzrathashem.org, BeEzrathashem.org. And you could also get over there tefillin or mezuzot, like some of you, Baruch Hashem, are getting. Always good to see people getting these things, because it tells us that they're doing well. Getting a different house, more rooms, expansion, Baruch Hashem, Ken Yirbu. Also, for anyone that wants to distribute some of the USBs and books in your community, the USBs that we have are starting to run out. We probably only have a few thousand left. And Baruch Hashem, we'll have to work on another order. But you could order for free to distribute in your community at kiruvstore.org. Kiruvstore.org is KIRUV store.org. You can get yourself a box or more and distribute in your community, or if anybody wants to get some of these amazing books, Baruch Hashem, many people have loved them. You could also get a box of these and some other books as well. Also, last but not least, I know that there is some of you that have asked for different prayers or blessings or sgulot for having children. There is a famous sgula that is told by many chachamim throughout history. One of them is actually a very famous one, especially in our generation. I've said this many times, which is, if you want to have a skula for having children, sponsor a sefer, meaning anybody that sponsors the writing of a sefer kodesh will merit BeEzrat Hashem to have a child. So this is certainly a big skula. It's checked, baduk, and Baruch Hashem, it's worked. So with that being said, we have our series, of course, everything that's happened over these last few days, makes people think about things a little bit differently than they did in the last several weeks, after you see some of the historical, stories of America come back to life. The assassination of Martin Luther King or J.F. Kennedy, attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. Some of these things were pretty much buried deep into the history books until you saw an attempted assassination of Donald Trump, who was the former president and running, of course, again. And many people are starting to see that, wow, it doesn't matter where a person is in their life, they literally can lose it just like that. Even if they are in the most, or one of the most powerful positions in the world, Hashem can decide simply to take anybody's life at will. And of course, this is one of the things that makes people start understanding that it's not just other people's lives, it's our own lives. Everybody's lives are always in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now more than ever, people are seeing that the disasters that are happening in Israel, in this atrocious war, where you pretty much have had politics lose the war. It wasn't the soldiers that lost the war. It was literally politics that lost the war, because these politicians are doing everything possible to make our soldiers weaker. and whether it's the politicians in Israel or politicians in America or other countries. But of course, when we learn Torah, we understand very clearly that it's not necessarily the politicians per se that we have to point fingers at and blame them for the losses, blame them for the death, blame them for the disasters, but rather we have to point the finger back at ourselves, because we realize that if we were doing enough teshuvah, if we were publicizing enough Torah, if we were publicizing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name properly, then of course these wars wouldn't happen in the first place. But it's only because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to rebuke his people that these types of things are happening. And unfortunately, we are at a time where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is showing us pretty clearly that he's closing the store and he's collecting all of the outstanding debts. And that's pretty much what's happening, not just in Israel, not just in America, but literally in individual houses. You're seeing a lot of things happen in people's lives as if their lives have become some organized chaos put on fast forward, where it seems like it's more chaos than the organized part. People are coming to us from all walks of life, young, old, married, single, male, female, and literally it seems like everybody is just looking for themselves, looking for an answer. And of course, Rav Elchonon Wasserman already told us in the prior lecture that we had in this series, which is when Am Yisrael finds themselves lost because of everything that's happening, all of the difficulties and the turmoil of the exile, whether it's financial problems, health problems, political problems, any other type of problem. If you find yourselves in a difficulty, look back to the ancient shepherds. Look back to Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, David, Shlomo. Look back to these ancient shepherds, and you will see that these ancient shepherds walked in my way, and therefore I protected them. They walked according to my Torah, and therefore I celebrate them. And this is in essence more relevant now than ever, as we see that the situation for Am Yisrael at large, whether you are religious or not religious, is at risk in every part of the world. The anti-Semitism that has become standard around the world doesn't look like it has any end in sight. And for those of you that are delusional, that think that, perhaps if Donald Trump wins, especially since he got a vice president that he wants to have with him that's also pro-Israel, maybe that's going to be our shining star. Don't delude yourself. The hands of the kings are in the hands of HaShem. Meaning that once a person becomes a king, HaKadosh Baruch Hu in essence decides what this king is going to do. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants the king to be anti-Semitic, he'll be anti-Semitic even if he's Jewish himself, like the Rasha from Ukraine. Despite the fact that the Jews have helped him probably more than anybody else. He hates Jews literally no different than Hitler. If he could kill all of them, he'd be happy, even though he's a Jew technically. The fact that so many have helped him and continue to help is bizarre. But nonetheless, this is part of our confusion in a generation. You're seeing that the situation that the Jewish people have here in America is really, really difficult. Why? On one end, you're seeing that there's anti-Semitism in the streets. There's anti-Semitism in every state. There's protests. There is cheering for the terrorists. There is promoting of terrorism and annihilation of the Jewish people. While at the same time, you have a few lone speakers that go on the media that say, no, the Jewish people are good people, Israel is our ally. And, it gives people hope because, every time you have some person say anything that's positive about the Jewish people, you see this shared in every Jewish group known to man. They don't necessarily share all the anti-Semitic ones because that would pretty much bring down the internet because there's so much of it. But the problem is that we're still in a situation that we have these false gods where people are instilling power into people, into politics, into countries, into anything other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this, As Chachmenu Zichronam Livracha, our sages in past generations have said time and time again, this is a big part of the reason of why we're in exile in the first place. As one of the Rishonim, the grandson of the Rabbeinu Tam, famously said, we're in the exile because we still have false beliefs and false gods. Now, what can we say that, about the fact that these false beliefs should easily be resolved if the rabbis came out there and told people, listen, stop having faith in Trump, stop having faith in Biden, stop having faith in America, stop having faith in Israel, stop having faith in the army or in the Iron Dome or in your money or in your political position or whatever it is that you have, and just believe in God. Why can't all of the rabbis simply do that? Well, the truth is that many of the rabbis are doing it, but their messages are silenced by the heretical voices of the false messiahs of the generation. Those that we've exposed in the past and those that we haven't gotten to expose yet, these false messiahs, these false prophets, these heretics are silencing the voice of truth because, unfortunately, the Satan is being gifted by HaKadosh Baruch Hu the ability to empower these people, make them very popular, make them very charismatic, make them people that people want to hear, people look to hear. And unfortunately, the voices of the false messiahs are loud, are everywhere. And there's not a day that goes by that they're not releasing more heretical videos that are capturing the hearts and the minds of ignorant Jewish people and Gentiles, and really making them believe that perhaps they could put their hope in something else other than what the Torah itself has said. So one of the big things that we see is that this is not just your typical war of the good versus bad, where, who has the best weapons, who has the biggest knives or guns. This is not the typical war. At the same token, you also see that the players that are playing, the soldiers, the generals that are in this war are not necessarily the same like we've had in the past. In previous generation, we had Avraham fighting against the world of idolatry all by himself. We had Yaakov fighting against idolatry, Yitzchak fighting against idolatry in different ways. So much so that even the wars that they fought against the enemy were not just about land or weapons. They were literally spiritual wars. And who knows more about spiritual wars than Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu's fight against Amalek was a war that the Me'am Loez calls the most extraordinary war that ever existed, even more than the final war of Gog and Magog. Why? Because the war between Am Yisrael and Amalek in the desert was a supernatural war. It had nothing to do with weapons and swords and things of that nature. The Amalek were all wizards, witchcraft. They knew when certain people were going to die, therefore they wouldn't send them into the battle. So how do you kill somebody that's not destined to die? Even if you stab the guy 50 times, nothing happens. Why? Because today is not the day. Others that could transform themselves into animals, all types of insane supernatural things that happen. Of course, Moshe Rabbeinu won. But it was only due to the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that this actually transpired. And throughout all of Jewish history, we have seen time and time again that Am Yisrael has fought battle after battle. And many of our holidays are based on those battles, whether it was the battle surviving Egypt in general, where we had HaKadosh Baruch Hu fight the war for us and take us out of Egypt with a strong arm. Strong arm does not mean that HaShem has an arm like the heretics like people to believe, but rather because it was a super miracle. There's a miracle and there's a super miracle. Am Yisrael, after 210 years of being in Egypt, the first half of it being an extraordinary time of success, of money, of beauty, similar to what we had in Germany, similar to what we had in Spain, similar to what we had in America, before the tragedies happened, before the Spanish Inquisition, before the Holocaust. Egypt was #1 place in the world for Jews. You could pray, you could make money, you could do whatever you want. Until it all came to a sudden end, and before you know it, the multimillionaire on the block that had 15 houses to choose from of where to vacation, and another 100 houses that he was renting to different people, became a slave with 0 property and 0 rights. You fast forward this exodus where HaKadosh Baruch Hu made one miracle after another in order to get us out of there. But Am Yisrael did not want to leave. After all of these plagues, Am Yisrael did not want to leave. Why? They simply could not see themselves as anything but slaves. After the first 100 years of being there, where we were on top of the world, and then turning into slaves, where the Egyptians were killing Jewish babies at will. Every morning, 150 babies, and at night, another 150 babies just for their blood. So Paro can take a shower and sit in a bath because he had tzaraat, and his necromancers told him that the only cure is Jewish blood. Imagine such a life, where the women are given men's jobs and the men are given women's jobs just to break their morale. Over 100 years of this. Over 100 years where you don't have the right to sleep when you want, eat when you want. And there's a good chance you won't even survive the day if you don't meet your quota. This was much worse than even the Holocaust. So over 100 years of this, the Jewish people got to the point where they no longer saw freedom as a reality. Even when Moshe Rabbeinu is showing them miracle after miracle from the hand of HaShem. And therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to make a super miracle, says the sages. A super miracle to literally transform their inner self and make themselves see themselves as free people. This was not just a miracle, Chazal calls it a super miracle. Furthermore, in the desert, we had wars against Amalek, against the Canaanites, against giants. Many people are very interested into the giants. Apparently, they've watched too many movies, too many Hollywood movies, so they think that maybe they'll bring those movies back to life. So they watch all types of heretics and Christian missionaries and anyone else that has nothing else to do but lie. Take the truthful parts of the Torah that talk about giants and other parts and put their falsehood stamp on it. Saying that the giants came from aliens, saying that the giants are still here, or they're checking on us, all types of stupid things. But the truth is, we did see in the Torah itself, Am Yisrael go to war against giants. That was Sichon, that was Og. Each one of them had a country. Each one of them had a legion, a whole army of warriors. Sichon and Og were related. Some say they were father and son. Others say they were brothers. Either way, these were giants, descendants of the Nephilim. Am Yisrael had to fight them for survival. For survival, Rabotai. This was in the desert. And if that wasn't enough, as soon as Yeshua ben Nun brought Am Yisrael into Israel, at that time still called Canaan, he had to fight 31 different countries, each one with weapons, with experience, with a lust for blood. And if that wasn't enough, of course, we had the other historical battles throughout all of history. But we didn't win all of these battles. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Romans, the Greeks, the Spaniards, the Turks, the Nazis, all of these different major countries went to war with us at one point or another, and some of them nearly destroyed us, while others, we barely survived. But of course, we are here and they're not. And Rabbi Elchonon Wasserman has taught us that this is all due to the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised the earlier shepherds, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that Am Yisrael is like the Torah and will always be. No one will ever destroy us. They may hurt us, they may damage us, but they will never destroy us. But interestingly enough, even through these battles, we saw the different treatment that HaShem has for the Jewish people versus the nations, where the Jewish people have suffered more than all of the other nations combined throughout all of history. Anyone that goes through Jewish history from obviously the Jewish perspective sees how much we've suffered, whether it's slavery, poverty, prosecution, false, blood libels, everything and anything you could possibly imagine we've gone through. Holocaust, time and time again. The Nazi Holocaust wasn't the only Holocaust we went through. But yet we're here. But the nations that went against us were always the most powerful nations. And these nations were allowed to become powerful world leaders. Nebuchadnezzar controlled the entire world, where Daniel the prophet says that the interpretation of his dream was that Hashem promised him that he will be the most powerful king in the world until MaShiach comes. The Assyrians were the most powerful in the world. The Romans, most powerful. Greeks, most powerful. And on, all of them were the most powerful. Hashem gave them wealth, gave them a brain to use whatever ability they had to empower themselves and enrich themselves even further. So when they went to war with us, everyone viewed it as, what's the point? Obviously you won the game. You won the war. And of course, many a times they did. But interestingly enough, HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows his mercy and his special treatment of the Jewish people through these wars and the outcome of these enemies. Well, on one hand, he shows us how, as great as we may think we are, when we have money, when we have power, he can bring us to nothing in a very, very quick, swift hit from his stick. Release of the dogs of Edom and Amalek and Ishmael. On the other end, when the time comes to punish us, he always makes sure that there's enough of us to continue the promise that was made to our forefathers. But when it comes to the nations, he lets them prosper. He lets them gain extraordinary power and wealth. He lets them even control the world for an extended period of time. These nations, in some cases, controlled the world for hundreds of years. But when the time comes for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to punish them, it's not the same as the punishment of the Jewish people, because they do not have a promise from Hashem that they will survive. And therefore, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu punishes the nations, no matter how big and strong they are, no matter how powerful they are, he annihilates them completely, wipes them off the face of the earth, and they literally become just a part of history. The only way that you could know that they existed is through different research, archaeological researches, and simply history books. You don't have any descendants from the Romans, and certainly none of the descendants of the Greeks. The Greeks of today has nothing to do with the Greeks that fought against us. The Greeks that fought against us a couple of thousand years ago were in Syria. They weren't in Greece. Either way, we see how HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs in his world very, very differently when it comes to the nations versus his chosen people, the Jews. And if the Jews find themselves in these troubled times of the era of MaShiach and at the latter stages that we find ourselves in, where it's the War of Amalek is upon us, we have to look at our forefathers, at these ancient shepherds, these loyal shepherds, in order to know what path to go on. Because while all of these wars are in our history books, the most dangerous wars are not necessarily the wars that people are so aware of. Because the most dangerous wars that we've ever faced were actually the wars that were before the war. Meaning that just like when Rabbi Yosef Karo, when he published the Shulchan Aruch, some Chachamim were not just impressed by the Sefer. Some Chachamim asked, what mitzvah, what great deed did he do to merit writing such a book? Writing books, Chachmei Yisrael have written books, Baruch HaShem, and one book better than the other. We have, Baruch HaShem, millions of books in Judaism. There's no end in sight of how many books. If you study 24 hours a day for 1,000 years, you will not finish all the Torah that's available to us. And the Torah that's available to us is not even a drop in the ocean in comparison to the Torah that's truly available in Shemayim. But in this particular case, the sages, when they saw the Shulchan Aruch, and everyone accepted it as this is Da'at Torah for all of Am Yisrael, even the Ramah that was also writing a similar Shulchan Aruch from the perspective of the Ashkenazi Jews, instead of writing a separate Sefer, he simply combined his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. And today when you buy a Shulchan Aruch, you have both the Ramah and Rabbi Yosef Karo, where Rabbi Yosef Karo you'll see in the big print and the Ramah is in small print. But everyone asked, everyone accepted it. There was no machloket. But they asked, what great merit did he do? What great deed did he do to merit writing such a book that all of Am Yisrael is obligated to follow? The same concept, Rabotai, works in the opposite. All of these wars that we've had, we have to ask ourselves, what awful deed did we do to unfortunately be in the circumstance that we deserved such a war? Now, of course, the prophets have clarified it throughout history. Whether it's at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, where we saw that Am Yisrael made mistakes, 10 different challenges, 10 different tests for HaShem. Each time HaShem punished them differently, in some cases with war. Or later on, when we went against HaShem in different ways. And Rabbi Elchonon Wasserman tells us a little bit more of not only what put us in these positions, but how do we deal with them? Because it's usually the war before the war that is the most critical. Because if we could win the war before the war, or the battle before the war would never be. If Am Yisrael was all in the Bet Knesset, learning Torah, celebrating Torah, October 7th would have never happened. If Am Yisrael was all celebrating the Torah and following HaShem, the Holocaust would have never happened. HaShem time and time again tells us that if we follow His Torah, we will only have blessings. when we don't, he has to rebuke us. He has to punish us in order to make sure that we stay his nation and not become just another nation. And Rav Wasserman says as follows in the 8th section, which we started last week. After telling us about following in the footsteps of the shepherds, as we are Hashem's favorite, we are the most beautiful of nations. And he says as follows, Umatzinu shnei yom tov. We have found that we have 2 holidays shenikveu ledorot lezecher hanisim, that were instituted for all generations to celebrate as a commemoration of the miracles that we had. Shenitzalnu migzerot Haman ve'Antiochus, that we were saved from the decrees of Haman and Antiochus. Haman, obviously, the time the Jews were in Persia, and Haman tried to destroy all of Am Yisrael. He was from Amalek. But since he wasn't the king, he convinced the king, Achashverosh, by giving him 10,000 kikare kesef, which I did the calculation at some point a few years ago with Rabbi Freiman. We figured out that it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $250 million or $300 million, an exorbitant amount of money, just to have the right to destroy all the Jews. Religious, not religious, didn't make a difference to him. He was like Hitler. He wanted to kill anyone that was a Jew. That's what Amalek wants. On the other hand, we had Antiochus. Antiochus imach shimo caused more damage to Am Yisrael than even Haman. Why? He wanted to destroy us, not by killing us, but rather by making us abandon God. And we have these 2 holidays of Chanukah and Purim that were instituted by the sages to celebrate the miracles that we were saved from these decrees. And Rav Wasserman says, V'yesh hafresh ben shnei yom tov elu. And there's a difference between these 2 holidays. Sheyom Purim nikva liyom mishteh v'simcha, v'yimei Chanukah einam yimei mishteh v'simcha. That on Purim, it was instituted when the sages added these holidays. Out of all the holidays, there are only 2 holidays. All of the holidays we have are from the Torah, except these 2 holidays that were instituted by the Chachamim. And as a side note, today is Arav Elchonon Wasserman's Yartzeit. He was murdered in cold blood by the Nazis as he died on Kiddush Hashem on the 11th of Tammuz, 5701, 83 years ago. The Gregorian calendar date is July 6, 1941, but of course we know that the Gregorian calendar is not exactly precise. Now, we see that Rav Elchonon Wasserman is mentioning each word carefully because, as Rabbi Ephraim says, after his murder, we weren't left orphans. We were left with his writings. We were left with his wisdom. And in his wisdom, in his writings, anything that he wrote, we see that Rav Elchonon Wasserman knew not only what was going to happen during his life and after his death, but he literally knew everything that's going to happen until the MaShiach comes. He left us with instructions of how to deal with the times we are living at today. As if HaKadosh Baruch Hu disclosed the secrets of the future to Rav Elchonon Wasserman like he did to the prophets. It's unbelievable, some of the things that he has written and what we're going to be reading today. And the Jewish people, he says, have all types of holidays, fasts, the exception of the month of Cheshvan. Every month we have something except the month of Cheshvan, which many call Mar Cheshvan. Why Mar Cheshvan? Mar means bitter. So it's a bitter month. There's nothing to celebrate. Every month we have either a holiday or a fast. Something. Cheshvan, nothing. But really, Cheshvan is actually, we do have a reason to celebrate. Because that's the time where we change in our prayers to Mashiva Ruach U'Morida Geshem, the winter prayer. And the sages have taught us that a day that it rains are as great as the day that the world was created, the heaven and the earth were created. Because we need, obviously, rain for survival. We need rain for the world. But the two holidays of Chanukah and Purim were instituted by the sages, some of which were prophets. Obviously, they didn't just decide this because they liked it. There were many other special days in different communities, different Jewish communities around the world that were specifically focused on something that happened in that community, in Spain, in Yemen. Different countries have Jews that have special holidays because of certain miracles that happened in those communities many years ago. But they never became holidays for all of Klal Yisrael. They were just special days commemorated by the communities. Some of which are commemorated until this day. Like we talked about last week, that the Jews that are in Spain commemorating the survival from the Inquisition by celebrating Pesach Sheni. There are Jews in Yemen surviving a decree, a blood libel, that they survived by an open miracle where the kid, after fasting for a few days, it was a special tzaddik child that literally resurrected the dead in order to uncover the true murderer. A lot of interesting things happened to Am Yisrael in different communities, but none of them became a law for all Jewish people everywhere, except Chanukah and Purim. Chanukah and Purim were special days. And Rav Wasserman says, the difference here we see, Chanukah and Purim, is that Purim is a day that we celebrate with a feast. It's a feast day. Chanukah, on the other hand, there's no feast. Rather, our mitzvah during Chanukah is to thank and glorify God. That's the mitzvah of Chanukah. Now, both of these holidays are not just special days, but rather these were days that Am Yisrael celebrates surviving the decree, and they're both unique in the way we survived and the battles that were fought, why it was fought. And the sages say that these two holidays are symbolized by the verse David HaMelech wrote in Tehillim number 124, verse number 8, where he says, Apach nishbar v'anachnu nimlatnu, that the snare broke and we escaped. Meaning the decree broke and we escaped. As a side story, this particular verse, anyone who wants to look it up and double check what I'm saying, the genius of Rabbi Yonatan Eibishitz was already discovered when he was just a child. He was a little shovav, he was a little troublemaker, but he was a genius. And when he was learning Torah, the teachers back then were a lot more challenging than the ones we have today. And they would give the kids some serious projects. But sometimes these projects meant to do one thing but ended up having a different result, as we'll see from this story. the rabbi told the class, okay, today I know everybody wants to play. It's nice outside. So I'm going to give you a task. I want you to find a verse anywhere in the Tanakh that adds up to the total amount of candles that we light on Chanukah. As soon as the class finds it, you guys can go outside and play. Now, of course, this is not the days of computers. This is a few hundred years ago. There's no computers. There's no AI. There's barely books. So the teacher is in essence giving the class an opportunity to go through the entire Tanakh, going verse by verse, each one looking at the verses, counting the letters, in the process learning the verses. But this is like at least a day worth of work for the class. But to his surprise, literally within a second, little Yonatan, who later on becomes Rabbi Yonatan Eibishitz, spits out a verse, Apach nishbar ve'anachnu nimlatnu, where not only he gives the verse to the rabbi that has exactly 44 letters in it, which is the number of total candles that we light on the 8 days of Chanukah, but he even gives him a verse that is identifying and clarifying the situation that the kids find themselves in, where the enclosure, the box that we're in, the class, has been broken and we have escaped. So go look it up, you'll see. Psalm 124, verse 8. Now, this verse is also the one utilized by the sages to describe the two extraordinary holidays of our survival, of Purim and Chanukah. Because the nations tried to destroy us and we escaped. So the question that Rabbi Elchonon Wasserman is, in essence, bringing up here, why is there a difference? Since we survived both of them from those that wanted to destroy us, why is it that one of them is celebrated by a feast, like the other holidays of Pesach, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, while the other one, there's no feast? In fact, if you look at the Shulchan Aruch, in halachot of Chanukah, in Siman 670, in the second halacha, the Shulchan Aruch clearly says, ריבוי הסעודות שמרבים בהם הם סעודות הרשות שלא קבעום למשתה ושמחה. In so many words, we celebrate our holidays by having feasts. But then the Rama adds and says, Yesh Omrim, meaning some sages also say, שיש קצת מצווה בריבוי הסעודות. Some sages say that there's also a mitzvah, small one, to also do a feast on Chanukah. Even though it's not instituted as a lachat that you have to have a seudah, a feast on Chanukah. He says there are some sages that say that you do have a reason to celebrate and have a feast on Chanukah. Why? שבאותם ימים היה חנוכת המזבח. Because on those days, there's a reason to celebrate because there was Chanukah Mizbeach, that we were able to bring the sacrifices. Meaning, even if you have a Seudah, it's not because we survived the war of the few Hashmonaim fighting against the entire Greek army. No, that's not the reason why we have a Seudah. We have a Seudah because we were able to bring the sacrifices. This, if anything, is confusing even more. First, you're telling me, okay, there's no Seudah, even though it was also a war, even though we also survived. Now you're telling me, yeah, if you're going to have a Seudah, The reason why you have a Seudah is because of the sacrifices, not because we survived a near demise of the entire people and pretty much the entire world. Why is this the case? Wasserman says, "Ta'am ha'evdel hazeh piresh balevush." The difference between the two was clarified by one of the sages from just a few hundred years ago, Rabbi Mordechai Jaffe, who wrote Sefer Levush, which in English translates to garments. Why did he call it his series of Sfarim? It's not just one little tiny book. This is a series of Sfarim covering endless amount of Torah. A Levush was because this tzaddik, Rabbi Mordechai Jaffe, was a merchant trying to make a living, and one time one of these rich women looked at him and saw how beautiful he was. He was a very, very handsome person. He had a beautiful light to him. And she told him, "Okay, I want to buy all the different things. Come to my house." He comes to her house, and as soon as he comes, she locks the door. And there's no way to exit the house. And she says to him, "I'm not letting you leave the house until you make sins with me." Now he knows that him screaming is not going to help. She'll just say something to the police and he'll get killed. Him making a sin, it's even worse. HaShem will destroy him. If not today, then eventually. What do? Clever as he was, this tzaddik says, "Sure, no problem. But I haven't eaten anything yet today. If you could make something while I go and freshen up, I'll go to the bathroom." She was wealthy enough that she even had a bathroom in the house, which was not common in those days. And she says, "Sure." Sure, she went with her crazy mind, started cooking up a feast, and the Levush goes to the bathroom, sees there's only one way out of this house. How? Through the bathroom. Through the bathroom. No windows, no back door, but the bathrooms were a hole in the ground. In those days, there were a hole in the ground. He went into the hole of the ground, through all the feces and the filth and the garbage and disgustingness. He went through all of it, and eventually it leads to the outside. He went through all of it just to escape this Goya, so he doesn't have to go against HaShem. And then when he eventually got to his home, as he took out, to clean himself obviously, as he took out each garment, he calculated and counted how many garments did he wear. And he says to HaShem, "To thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for saving me from going against you, I promise you that I will write a sefer glorifying your name for each one of the garments that I wore. Because each one of these garments protected me from the sin." And that's what he wrote the Levush. The Levush is a series of books that is called garments, but it's in essence each one of the garments. I believe he wore something like 10 or 15 garments. That's how many books are in this series of books. Just understand that tzaddikim Am Yisrael has. So the Levush, he writes that there's a difference between these two decrees, these two holidays. What's the difference? One, you celebrate with a feast. One, you celebrate by thanking HaShem and glorifying His name. Mapshat, why? Why is this the case? מפני שגזירת המן הייתה על הגופים להשמיד, להרוג ולאבד, ולא נזכר כלל שהיו יכולים להינצל על ידי עזיבת הדת. אבל גזירת אנטיוכוס הייתה רק על הנפשות. He says it's because the decree of Haman was on the bodies, to destroy them, to kill them, to eliminate all Jews. And it was not mentioned anywhere that they can save themselves by abandoning the Torah, by abandoning Judaism and converting to the Amalek religion or something like that. No. Simply put, Haman wanted to destroy all of the Jewish people, no matter what their affiliation was to Judaism. But the decree of Antiochus, for the Greeks, was not on the bodies. It was only on the souls. He didn't want to destroy the Jewish people. He was willing to give them jobs in politics, big houses, lots of money. Only one condition. What's the condition? כתבו לכם על קרן השור שאין לכם חלק באלוקי ישראל. As long as you write, like a bumper sticker on any carriage, and even on the baby bottles, which were like horns, that from animal horns, that they turn them into bottles, and that's how they fed the babies. Write on everything, what? That you have no share of the God of Israel. If you write that, you're automatically first-class citizen, you're in politics, you're a top in everything that you're doing. We're going to recommend you everywhere. Just say you have no share of the God of Israel. He says that's the difference between the two decrees. And this is the reason why the way we celebrate them is different. And now we'll see, says Rav Wasserman, what did our forefathers do in those particular situations in order to be saved from both of these decrees? And we saw that in the decree of Haman, Matzenu BeEzrat Haman, that the Jews did not think for a second that they have any other choice other than tzumu alai, that to fast, and then v'tipol Esther el raglei hamelech v'tifke v'titchanen, and Esther fell on her knees and begged to the king. And anytime it says the melech, it's really to HaShem. Beg to HaShem, meaning that in the decree of Haman, what did Am Yisrael do? They did Teshuvah, they fasted, they pleaded with HaShem. אבל לא עלתה על דעתם להילחם בזרוע נגד המן. And it never went on anybody's mind to fight against Haman with fists, with swords. I mean, technically, Esther could have poisoned him. He was coming to her feast. She could have easily put a few drops of poison in his wine and blamed it on one of the another Bigtan Veteres, like they tried to kill Achashverosh at some point. So now they killed Haman. She could blame it on somebody else. After all, she's the queen. She could do it if she wants. But no. At no point did anyone think, not Mordechai, not Esther, not anybody, think that we could fight Haman with weapons. ואין לאמור עתה מפני שידעו שאין כוח בהם לעמוד נגד האויב. And it makes no sense to say that everyone knew that they don't have the strength to go fight against the enemy. This is meaningless, he says. שהרי היו בהם נביאים, because they had among them, they had prophets at the time of Purim. They had prophets among them. ואילו ידעו כי הוא רצון השם להילחם נגד המן, ודאי היו מוסרים את עצמם להריגה. The prophets would have known that if it was the will of Hashem for us to fight against Haman with weapons, with the war, of course everybody would have sacrificed their life and died just for the sake of doing the will of Hashem. Furthermore, he says, והרי גם החשמונאים היו מעטים נגד רבים. Even more so when you see on the other side, you see the fighting in Chanukah against the Greeks. It's well known that the Hashmonaim were very few. against many of the Greeks. And they were weak. The Jews were weak. They were avrechim, Torah scholars. They were not soldiers practicing battles every day. Against warriors that all their lives, all they did is train for battle. And despite all of that, the Chashmonaim did not stop themselves from fighting. Even though there were few, and the Greeks were many, even though they were weak, and the Greeks were strong, they knew that this is the way to fight. So on one end, we see the time of Haman, decree to destroy all of Am Yisrael, kill everybody. Nobody says one word about, let's fight them with our missiles. Let's fight them with our army. They want to fight, we're going to bring a fight to them. Not one person. Mordechai prays, teaches Torah, does Teshuvah, puts a sack on himself, gets all the kids together to learn Torah. Esther says, fast for 3 days. I'm going to do Teshuvah, beg to the king. Nobody raised even a fork to kill any of these Amaleks. Nobody do nothing other than do Teshuvah. Fast forward to the time of Chanukah, the Greeks say, we don't want to kill you. We just want you to stop being religious. We don't want to kill you. We just want you to cut the peot and be like everybody else. No kippah, no peot, walk around with shorts and a t-shirt or a tank top or no shirt at all. And that's it. Be like us. Stop covering your hair. Stop being modest. Stop being loyal to your husband. Stop. Just be like us. Steve can marry Steve. Joe can marry Joe. No problem. Everybody can do whatever they want. Like animals. We're not looking to kill you. In fact, if you do that, we'll give you a lot of money. And here, the few Torah scholars, the Chashmonaim, say we're going to fight with the swords and we're going to die for the sake of this battle. What about the fact that they're the biggest army in the world and you are just a few? We're going. What about the fact that you don't even know how to hold a sword? We're going. What about the fact that even if you beat a few of them, there are millions of more coming? We're going. What about that some of the enemy are actually Jews that became Greeks that are actually fighting on their side against you? We're going. So how could this be? How does this make any sense? On one hand, Mordechai and Esther and the rest of Am Yisrael does not even lift the fork. No knives, no fork. We're saying the only way to fight this war is by doing Teshuvah. Chanukah, only way to fight this war is by doing Teshuvah and exerting all of our effort to sacrifice our life to kill the enemy. So you can't use that as the reason that they were more stronger than us or anything like that, says Rav Wasserman, in the name of the Levush. Ela ברור, כי בימי המן ידעו כי לא זו הדרך להילחם בזרוע, ואחזו רק באמונת אבותיהם, לצעוק אל השם, because at the time of this war against Haman, Am Yisrael knew the way that Hashem wants us to fight this war is not with weapons. Rather, in us doing Teshuvah, having emunah in Hashem, following in the footsteps of our forefathers, the shepherds, and cry out to Hashem. But on the other hand, Omnam BeEzrat Antiochus, on the other hand, with the decree of Antiochus, of course they also fasted and did Teshuvah and prayed to Hashem, but regardless of that, they knew that would not suffice. But they were willing to go and fight and die in the war וצריך להבין טעם ההבדל הזה. And we have to learn the purpose, the reason behind this difference. So up to here is the 8th section of the writings of Rav Wasserman. And in so many words, Rav Wasserman is telling us this very difficult circumstance that Am Yisrael found themselves in. And they fought both battles differently. And as a result of fighting both battles differently, the battles and the success of these battles, the winning of these battles, of these wars, is the reason why we commemorate those differently. But more than anything else, Rav Wasserman is telling us, of course, since this is all part of the same writing, that we have to learn all of this because we're going to have to deal with all of this again in our times today, in the era of MaShiach and the war against Amalek. Now, as we said, in Purim, in the decree of Haman, Am Yisrael understood that fighting this issue is not needed to, you don't need to use knives and swords and guns and bombs and so on. We have to do Teshuvah. Why do we have to do Teshuvah? Because the battle that we lost before this war, before this decree, was not a battle that was a battle of weapons and so on, but rather a problem that occurred among us where Achashverosh had a feast and invited everyone to come, and instead of us continuing to separate ourselves from the nations, instead of us focusing on our Torah and honoring the only real king, the King of Kings, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, many went to the party to celebrate under the excuse that, well, they'll have kosher food there and they'll have kosher wine there. You know, in the White House, they have kosher food. They have They've invited us. How can we say no? And you know that such and such rabbi went there also, and he's coming. And everybody went to the party of the Goyim, even though we should have listened to the Gadol Hador, Mordechai, who said, don't go. That, Rabotai Karim, was the battle we lost. We did not listen to Da'at Torah. Da'at Torah said, don't go and celebrate all of these events of the Gentiles. You can send a letter, say thank you, we can't come, we're all busy, or simply just not show up. At the end of the day, there is many nations that are coming, and even if you want to show respect, you can go and leave. But the party was for 6 months, and many stayed there for months. Not only did they go, they enjoyed it. For this, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, not only did you violate the instructions from Gedolei Hador, but you actually enjoyed the sin. For that, you have to do Teshuvah. You have to do Teshuvah. Why? Because the decree was to destroy Am Yisrael, because Am Yisrael was destroying itself. So for that, you have to do Teshuvah. And the Teshuvah is praying to HaShem, fasting, saying I'm sorry. On the other hand, when it came to Chanukah, they didn't want our lives. They wanted our neshamot. They wanted us to abandon God. And therefore, we had to look at, what did we do? What did we do? Oh, look at that. Many didn't just go to a one-time party. Many went to many parties of the Greeks. They went to the Colosseums. They went to all of the immoral events and became Greeks like them. Many that knew that this was wrong did not speak up against it, meaning that this problem became an epidemic of the generation, where many not only went and joined the Goyim for one-time events for a few months, rather they abandoned the Torah altogether. And when the Goyim saw that so many are coming to join them, they took advantage, said, you know what, why is there a difference between us after all? Why don't we all just become one nation? Just like Hamor came to Yaakov Avinu after they raped his daughter Dinah. They said, listen, why don't we all become one people? And the sons of Yaakov said, well, we can't become one people if you guys don't have Brit Milah. Now, of course, this was all a ploy in order to weaken them so they could go there and kill Shimon and Levi. Went and killed everybody over there. How could you possibly ever imagine in your crazy mind that we could become one people when you guys think that the way to get a wife is by capturing her as a hostage? You think we can become one people with animals like you? But they thought, no, become one people. The same thing the Greeks thought. Look, you're coming to our parties. You're dressing like us. You're not modest like us. You're immoral like us. You like our writings. Even though, as a side note, the Me'am Loez brings that Aristotle, who was the main genius at the time of the Goyim, abandoned his own ways, and some Chachamim even say that one of the sages, I believe it was Rabban Gamliel, or Rabbi Shimon, or Rabban Shimon, I believe, that actually helped Aristotle not only abandon his ways, but convert to Judaism. And the Ma'archu, in the name of the Arizal, writes, the Ma'archu writes in the name of the Arizal, that Aristotle, because he converted, because he abandoned his ways, he reincarnated as the Chavruta of Rebbe HaKadosh. Who was the Chavruta of Rebbe HaKadosh? Gemara, Masechet Avodah Zarah, Antoninus. Antoninus was the Chavruta of Rebbe HaKadosh, and many halachot, many lessons come from the debate between these two tzaddikim. Either way, the Jews at the time of the Greeks abandoned the ways of the Torah, and the Greeks took advantage of it and said, you know what, why is there different nations? Why don't we all become one? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, since they're now feeling free to destroy Judaism by publicizing their heresy, and unfortunately many are falling for the heresy, the only way to fight is not just like the previous generation of doing Teshuvah. In this case, it's not just doing Teshuvah, but you have to fight to the death. You have to show that you're willing to sacrifice your life for the sake of the religion. To show that the mistakes were not just mistakes you're looking to fix just to save your life, you have to sacrifice your life. And as Rabbi Meir Shapiro of Lublin comments on Parashat Ki Tisa, and the verse over there in chapter 33, verse 21, the book of Exodus, where it's the scene where Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to HaShem, and he tells HaShem, I want you, show me your glory. And HaShem says, okay, I'll show it to you, but since you're still a human, you can't see everything. So when I pass by, you have to hide behind the rock. And he says to him, behold, there is a place near me. You may stand on the rock. Meaning, says Rabbi Meir Shapiro of Lublin, when it's near me, when you have a spiritual battle, you must stand strong like the rock and fight. That's Chanukah. That's Chanukah. But Hashem says, when my glory passes, then you can stand. Then you could, when it's in essence, when it's your honor that's on the line, your money that's on the line, you don't have to fight with your life. You could hide. You could run away. That's Purim. In so many words, the sages are telling us not all battles are fought the same way. The most important part that one has to understand about these battles is why they were brought in the first place. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu bring this in the first place? This is the reason why it's critical for people to know the answer to the famous question of where was God during the Holocaust? And as we've said, in the same words as great Chachamim have said throughout the last 80 years, where was God during the Holocaust? What do you mean where he was? He's the one that did it. You should be asking, where was Am Yisrael before the Holocaust? Am Yisrael was going against Hashem. And Hashem wrote in the Torah in multiple places, in Parashat Ki Tisa, he told us about Mechalel Shabbat, has no share of the world to come, gets death penalty. You know how many people were violating Shabbat in those times? In Parashat Ki Tavo, he was talking about intermarriage and how us uniting with the Goyim, marrying them, going against Hashem, violating the Torah, going towards idolatry, brings complete destruction. Do you know how many people abandoned the Torah during that time? Not only intermarrying, but actually converting to idolatrous religions. In Parashat Bechukotai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, if you treat my laws with casualness, and you treat the hits that I give you with casualness, I'm going to give you even more hits, 7 times more. Am Yisrael didn't get the Holocaust in 24 hours. Am Yisrael didn't get the Spanish Inquisition in 24 hours. This was a process. In 1933, when Hitler came to power, instead of Am Yisrael realizing that the same guy that wrote the Mein Kampf, that's discussing how much he hates the Jews and he wants to annihilate them from the world, instead of them realizing we have to leave Germany, we have to unite, we have to do Teshuvah, we have to go back to the footsteps of our forefathers, what do? They were busy fighting each other. So much so that the Zionists in Israel assassinated one of the leaders of the competing parties on the same day as Hitler came to power. Instead of realizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu just put Haman as a new leader of a place that had the most amount of Jews in the world at that time, and you're worried about politics to the point where you're assassinating each other? You think that you can resolve the problems with violence? So the sages are telling us here that the war we lost before Purim was a war where we failed by going to a place we shouldn't have gone to. and not listening to Da'at Torah. For that, everyone's lives was on the line until we did Teshuvah. But that was it. And we celebrate that with a feast. Hashem answered our prayers, we celebrate with a feast. The war of Achashverosh, the decrees of Achashverosh, were very different. Because Achashverosh got more and more powerful and got more and more of a desire to destroy the Torah as more and more Jews became Greeks. It wasn't a one-day problem. It wasn't a two-day problem. It was a problem. It was a series of problems that became a systemic problems. As many people abandoned the Bet Midrash and went to cash advance business. As many people abandoned the YESHIVA and went to do all types of immoral types of acts in their life. As many women, instead of building a Jewish home, decided to become career women that only have a pet dog, a cat, and a teddy bear that she pretends is really her son. She had no interest in being married anymore. She wanted to be like a Greek businesswoman. This became a systemic problem. The solution to a systemic problem, it's not enough for you to say, I'm sorry. You have to show that you're willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of the same thing you abandoned. Why? Because here, it's a battle against heresy. It's a battle against heresy. It's not just a battle for desire of money or, no, this is a battle of heresy. And the battle of heresy, the battle against false messiahs, is much more dangerous than a battle for desire for money. Because they didn't just go to a party like at the time of Purim. They started becoming Greeks. They started becoming philosophers. They started thinking that there's no God, or that God needs them, or that they could humanize God in some way or another. And this battle, the only way to win it is by sacrificing everything. The sacrifice, it wasn't enough to just say, I'm sorry, I'll start keeping Shabbat. I'm sorry, I'll stop wasting seed. No. You have to literally sacrifice everything in order for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to see, so when you just threw my Torah into the garbage and went to the Chukot HaGoyim, the laws of the Gentiles, the life of the Gentiles, and even started reading their philosophy books, it wasn't a permanent change. It was just a mistaken turn, because now you're willing to sacrifice your life to protect that very same Torah. Okay, you all save. You all save. So here Rav Wasserman is telling us a couple of things. Number one, the cause of the battle is a critical thing for us to know in order for us to know what's required for us to win. What's required for us to fight this battle. The second thing that we see is that the people that are going to fight the battle are going to be the ones that lead the battle, have to be unique. It can't just be anyone. It can't just be anyone that feels like, oh, you know what, I could do it. I could just go into the Greeks and tell them, no, I don't want to do it, and then just come home and... Because if you're fighting against the spiritual decree, you have to be willing to sacrifice everything. We saw that Esther was willing to sacrifice everything. Mordechai was willing to sacrifice everything. The Hashmonaim were willing to sacrifice everything. The followers of the Chashmonaim were willing to sacrifice everything. That Mesirut Nefesh was a critical common denominator among those that spearheaded the battles. And this is critical in the times that we have right now, that Rav Wasserman is clarifying for us, because in the times that we are right now, it's not like the times of Purim. See, at the time of Purim, it was just pure lust of a one-day event, a one-month event. Let me just go and justify spending the next 4 months caring about politics. No, it wasn't that. Because for that, doing Teshuvah from that will save you from the decree. And then you'll celebrate it with a feast. Because instead of going to the feast of the Goyim, you'll have feast with the Jews. But the decree of the Greeks only came because you adopted their heresy into your life. And therefore the celebration to commemorate the victory 2,000 years later has to be the tool that won the battle, which is sanctifying and glorifying God's name. It wasn't a feast. You weren't going to the Greeks for their feasts, for their food. You were going there for the lifestyle, for the ideology. You adopted heresy into your life. It was a much, much more dangerous situation. Now, over the last few hundred years, there's been no shortage of battles against heretics. The false messiahs that we've had over the last 2,000 years, of course, the worst among them is Yeshua Tzvi, Yimach Shemo v'Zichro, who until this day were suffering from the heresy and idolatry that he brought to the world. But he wasn't the last one. There is a sefer called Meshiche Sheker, the false messiahs. It's a whole huge book of all the different stories of the false messiahs that tried to influence Am Yisrael against their creator, against their father in heaven over the last 2,000 years. But the most damaging among them, aside from Yeshu, was Shabtai Tzvi. And Shabtai Tzvi, the reason why he was so damaging wasn't just because of what he did personally and how he literally influenced millions of people to follow him. But it was to such a degree that even after he died, which was, he converted to Islam and in order to save his life, but obviously he lost all credibility even among his followers after he did that, because he said that he was going to finish his job by taking the crown of the Turkish Sultan. And when the Turkish Sultan found this out, initially he arrested him because he was scared to kill him. But then, when he realized that everything that Shabtai Tzvi is saying and doing is even against our Torah, it's complete heresy, he ended up putting a death penalty on him. And in order to save his life, Shabtai Tzvi and his followers, a few of his followers that were together with him, all converted to Islam. And after that, he lost a lot of credibility, but the story didn't end with him. He eventually died, completely lost his share of the world to come. There's a certain section in the Sefer Minchat Yehuda by Rabbi Yehuda Ftaya, where Rabbi Yehuda Ftaya tried to help his neshama get out of the kafakela that it was in. And when this happened, this is some 80 years ago, 90 years ago or so, one of the family members of Rabbi Yehuda Ftaya is the Gabbai at our Bet Knesset in Israel. He told us the Israeli world was going wild at that times. Anyway, the Jewish world was going wild at that times when this was happening. Anyway, the Shabtai Tzvi debacle didn't end with Shabtai Tzvi, because Shabtai Tzvi had people to follow his teachings and his footsteps. His heresy didn't end with him, because his heresy wasn't pure heresy where there was nothing true among it. If you open a Daf Gemara with him, he'll go back and forth with you like the best of them. If you open the Halacha with him, he'll go back and forth with you like the best of them. He was a Talmid Chacham. But of course, he had his craziness that led him off the cliff against the Torah, violating the Torah in endless ways, saying the Shem Meforash as if he's saying a regular name, eating forbidden things, being with forbidden women, all types of things that are against the Torah. Literally violated every aspect of the Torah. But he had an enormous amount of money and support. He also had the ability to use witchcraft, and even had support from different Gentiles, powerful Gentiles, that were helping him, making him even more dangerous than anything we saw. And if that wasn't enough, after he died, he had followers repeat in his footsteps. The famous ones among them was Yaakov Frank and Nehemiah Chayun, who also had the ability to use witchcraft, who also had an enormous amount of money and support. They were very powerful, and also had powerful goyim at their fingertips to institute the law. And the followers were so dedicated to these heretics that they were willing to kill anybody that went against them. One of the greatest tzaddikim that was the enemy of these Shabtai Tzvi and his followers, one of the greatest tzaddikim was Rabbi Moshe Chagiz. He was one of the geniuses from a few hundred years ago. And Rabbi Moshe Chagiz was an extraordinary chacham in Yerushalayim. He saw Shabtai Tzvi, he saw all of these reshaim distort the Torah, and he went to war against them because he saw how damaging they were and how many people were following them. The main one he went to war against was Nehemiah Chayun. But he also went against the other followers like Avraham Michael Corduzo and Shlomo Ayalon, all of these different types of false messiahs. So much so that he wrote 5 different hashkafa books specifically targeting the fight against these heretics. Now, hashkafa books that fight against heretics are much more difficult to write than other books, because when you're writing against a specific heretic, then you know that all of your enemies, mainly being the heretic and their followers, are looking for any mistake you would possibly make. Word, language, source. And he exerted an endless amount of effort to write these Sfarim. Of course, he wrote many other Sfarim, but he dedicated a big part of his life to fight against the heretics. He wrote Milchemet Al Hashem. He wrote Shever Posh'im. He wrote Sefer Leman Dat Kol Amei Haaretz, which was a Michtav Charmot. He wrote the Igeret Akanaot. This was in the year 1714 in Germany. Edut LeYisrael. 5 different books against the heretic, Nehemiah Chayun, and the other Shabtai Tzvi followers. All being different types of heretics, false messiahs. Now, aside from all this, he also wrote many other Sfarim responses, about different, covering the entire Shulchan Aruch, the Leket HaKemach, or the Leket Al HaMishnah, on the 613 mitzvot. Baruch Hashem, he wrote many, many Sfarim. But these 5 specific books that fought against the heretics took an enormous toll on him and his life. And Rabbi Chaim Palachi bring Rabbi Moshe Chagiz as a source. In Rabbi Chaim Palachi's Sefer called The Responsa Chaim Bayad, in Siman 93. And he says as follows: Arav Leket HaKemach, meaning the rabbi that wrote the Sefer called Leket HaKemach, which is Rabbi Moshe Chagiz. In the commentary on Yoreh De'ah, page 111, Amudah 4. Amudah, in those days, they would have each page, each daf was, in essence, 2 pages, front and back. And each page would have a column. So, in those days, they had 4 columns, so it would be on the 4th column. He writes this: ואני אומר, דאם יהיה המקנה מקנה דווקא לכבוד השם ותורתו, ולא יהיה בליבו נוטה לעשות המחאה ההיא לשום פנייה תכלית, אני ערב לו, כי לא תאונה אליו רעה, והשם לא יעזבנו בידו ויעזרהו, על דבר כבוד שמו וכל מה שבעיניך. תהיה רואה להפך דון מינה, כי המוחה לא היה כל ליבו לשמיים. ודאי. In so many words, the Rabbi Moshe Chagiz is not only fighting against the heretics when he was in this world, but he makes a promise to anyone that fights the heretics ever. And this promise is also an instruction set, where he says, know this, I'm telling you this, that anyone that goes and is zealous against these heretics only for the sake of the honor of HaShem and His Torah, and there isn't even a piece of his heart that's biased against this person in order to gain something, gain likes, gain money, gain popularity, anyone that's clean of any type of personal agenda, when they're going against the heretics, when they're going against the false Messiah, if they're completely clean of any personal agenda and they're only doing it, they're only going against the heretic, the false messiahs, only for the sake of the honor of HaShem and His Torah, then I take responsibility on myself, meaning I'm going to be the one that will testify for him in Shamayim, that nothing bad will ever happen to him, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will never leave him. Meaning I'm promising you that if you're fighting for the sake of Hashem's honor and for His Torah against the heretics, against the Manases of the world, against the Goldbergs of the world, against whoever is going to go and distort the Torah, and you're only doing it for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His Torah, and not because you're looking for fame, not because you're looking for money, not because you're looking for any type of recognition, but only for the sake of Hashem, Rabbi Moshe Chagiz is saying, I'm promising you, while I'm in Shamayim, I'm promising you that nothing bad will happen to you. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will always be with you and will protect you. But also see, he says, also see that if you see someone that is zealous against the heretics, but bad things happen to him, he died in a tragic death, or some other type of horrible thing happened to him, know that part of his heart was not clean. Meaning, yes, he fought against the heretic, but part of the reason was because he had a personal benefit out of it. He wasn't completely unbiased. Maybe he's closing some old account against this heretic. This heretic perhaps, fired him from a job, threw him out of a keilah, or whatever. Took his lunch money. I don't know, whatever he did to him at some point 1,000,000 years ago, or 20 years ago. And he said, I'm going to take revenge against him. Oh, see, he said something wrong. Okay, now I'm going to go against him. So part of the reason why he's driving him is the old account. So here, Rabbi Moshe Chagiz, one of the greatest sages that lived in the last few hundred years, he's writing something. That this is Da'at Torah, this is a promise, this is literally a warning that's comforting. Why is a warning that's comforting? On one hand, he's saying, if you're going to go and fight against the heretics, you're going to be zealous against the heretics that are distorting the Torah, that are repeating what the Greeks did, that are repeating what Shabtai Tzvi did, that are repeating what Yeshu did, that are repeating what all of these Reshaim did throughout all of our Jewish history, trying to destroy us, not from the flesh, but the soul within. But you're doing it because of an agenda. You should be careful. Why? You're going to get hurt. Make sure that if you're going to be zealous against the heretics, it's not for any personal benefit. It's not for any personal agenda like, I want to show everybody that I'm right. I want to show everybody that I'm smart. If you have part of you that is going against the heretics because you want to prove other people that you know more than them, or any type of personal benefit, Rabbi Moshe Chagiz is telling you, you're going to get hurt. That's the warning. But the comforting part is that if you have a clean heart, and you're only fighting the heretics purely for the sake of the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His Torah, then you have an assurance of a divine protection because you're fighting the heretics for the sake of heaven. This is not coming from someone that is theorizing this. This is someone that fought against the worst type of heretics that ever lived. Much worse than the ones we have today. Today they distort the Torah, they use the internet and different types of media in order to popularize themselves and enrich their pockets with all types of distorted beliefs and literally a creation of a new religion, but they still like to call it Judaism. Or they call it Hasidut, all types of other things that make people believe this is the truth. But in those days, 300 years ago, when the Baaleket HaKemach, Rav Chagiz, is writing this, he is in the middle of a fight against people that are wizards, witchcraft, filthy rich, and have some of the powerful goyim in their pockets to kill anybody they want, to institute laws, to threaten anyone they want, and even followers that are willing to kill anybody that says anything against them. Meaning he is telling you this, that you're going to have this protection while he himself is inside a war against much more dangerous heretics than we have today. So from here we see, Rabotai Yekarim, that yes, there is a war, but there's different types of wars. In past generations, we failed And HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed his chosen people, his dear children, his firstborn, to do Teshuvah. But the Teshuvah requirements changed based on the sin. When we followed our desires, HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed us to do Teshuvah by simply saying, I'm sorry, committing to not repeating the sin, learning Torah, changing our lifestyle. We see it in this week's parasha. Am Yisrael follows their desires and goes and falls for the trap of Balak and Bilam. Balak and Bilam sent a bunch of zonot, bunch of immodest non-Jewish women to go and make Am Yisrael sin. HaKadosh Baruch Hu started punishing them. He brought a plague, killed 24,000 people in moments. But after Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen fulfilled the one and only time throughout history that you were able to fulfill this mitzvah, which is to kill the sinner in the middle of the sin, Hashem applauded him. Hashem celebrated him. Hashem blessed him. Why? Because Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen had a clean heart. He didn't do it because he didn't like Zimri. He didn't do it because he wanted something benefit out of it. He did it purely for the sake of the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his Torah. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made miracles for Pinchas. The Mishnah in Masechet Avot says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made 10 miracles for Pinchas. One of them was resurrecting him from the dead during that particular act, giving him superhuman strength. After that, he put his Shekhinah on him permanently. That's what it says, I'm going to give him Briti Shalom. What's Briti Shalom? That's the name of Hashem's Shekhinah that he put upon Pinchas. Why? Because his heart was clean. He had no bias when he was going against the sinner. And Am Yisrael was allowed to do Teshuvah by simply saying, I'm sorry. Why? Because they were followed their heart. They failed, but now you could do Teshuvah. But when Am Yisrael made the sin of the golden calf, when Am Yisrael made the sin of the Meraglim, when Am Yisrael made the sin, the time of Chanukah, those were sins of heresy. Those were sins of idolatry. Those were sins of ideology. A sin that led people to change their life altogether. It wasn't a one-time desire, a one-time mistake, a bad relationship. No, this was a person going off the derech completely and becoming a podcaster talking about how much he hates Judaism. This is somebody going off the derech and now, for the first time in his life, deciding that he needs to become famous because he left Judaism. This is somebody that abandoned everything and is causing other people to sin. For that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, the teshuvah for that is not just teshuvah like the sinners that go after money or go after lust, where you just say, I'm sorry and I forgive you. You have to do that, but you also have to be willing to sacrifice your life. Show me that you're willing to sacrifice your life for the very same Torah that you abandoned. And once you do that, then you can truly celebrate Chanukah the right way by glorifying Hashem's name even further. Not a feast, because you didn't fall for the feast sin. You fell for the ideology sin. You fell for something that's against Hashem. And therefore, the holiday is glorifying Hashem. Here we see, Rabotai Karim, that the battles that we've had in the past always had a solution, but the solution was not always the same. The battles that we face today are very, very similar to the ones we've had in the past. Some people have fallen for the trap of money, for the trap of popularity, for the trap of materialism, for the trap of lust. And therefore, when they hear one of our lectures or watch one of our films about my personal life, the movie HaShem Took Back His Millions, or they watch the film Tikkun BEIT, or the movie Gehenom, those types of people that have fallen for the trap of materialism are woken right away. Realize, whoa, I got to leave this non-Jewish boyfriend. Whoa, I got to leave this unethical business. Whoa, I got to go back to HaShem. And they do Teshuvah. Why? Because they realize they're on the wrong path. This is a wake-up call. And their Teshuvah path is not easy, but it's relatively smooth in comparison to those that fall for the heresy sins. Those that fall for the heresy sin, where they go off the derech after learning in yeshiva, or they simply decide to become a student of one of the famous heretics we've exposed and become one of his Hasidim, and they start adopting his beliefs and his philosophies. For them to do Teshuvah is much more difficult. Why? Because it's not enough for them to say, I'm sorry. They'll have to make major sacrifices. In the times that we find ourselves today, Rabotai Yekarim, we have to help anyone and everyone that we possibly can do Teshuvah. Whether it's someone that has fallen for materialism and the likes, do Teshuvah, or it's someone that has fallen for the heretics and the false messiahs. We have to help everyone and anyone. But the major lesson that we can learn from Rav Wasserman and also from Rav Chagiz that Rabbi Chaim Palachi brings is that if you want a chance to win the battle, there cannot be any hidden agendas. There cannot be any personal benefit that you're looking for as a result of it. Because if you have some agenda, some personal benefit that you're looking for, and that's the reason, that's the motivation, you're not only not going to win and not going to help people, but you're probably going to get hurt really bad. On the other hand, if you come to fight against the heretics, the false messiahs, the missionaries, for all types of things that are against the Torah, and you come with a clean heart, with no agenda, with no desire for personal benefit, then you are assured to have divine protection to the extent where even when they send the FBI to your house, the IRS to your house, they throw you out of the community, they cause problems, they turn people against you, they spread all types of lashon hara against you, they make up all types of rumors against you, they take your CDs that you give people for free and throw them in the garbage, they send you pictures of them throwing your book into the garbage, they try to taint your name in every way possible, on the internet, in the community, in every way possible. No matter what they send you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help you. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will protect you. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will build you to rise above all of them. Because that is what is needed for people to have some sense of direction of where the forefathers went. If we want to win, we have to remove bias. We have to move personal interest. And when we do that, we will see the blessing during the war. Sure, there are different types of wounds and problems and headaches that come in a battle. But in the end, HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises you that you will not fall, because He is there to lift you. This, Rabotai Karim, is what we needed to learn today from Rabbi Elchonon Wasserman on his Yartzeit. Next week, BeEzrat HaShem, we will learn furthermore of the significant difference that can be learned from the battles and the celebrations of Purim and Chanukah, and how it has to do with the War of Amalek. And BeEzrat HaShem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give us the strength, and the wherewithal, and the merit to continue learning the holy words of Rabbi Elchonon Wasserman and all of the holy sages that fought against the heretics, that fought for the sake of the Torah and the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that have helped countless Jews back then and even till this day return to their Father in heaven. Anyone that wants to help support these lectures, you can sponsor a lecture by going to the website, BeEzratHashem.org. You could just donate. You could do a lot of different things to support BeEzrat Hashem. Thank you very much for learning with me. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless each and every one of you that watches this, that supports us, and most importantly, that applies these lessons to their life and shares it with the people they care about. Kol Tuv, Bracha V'Atzlacha.
HaShem, אנחנו כאן לוקחים את החבילות בכל רחבי הארץ, תראו מה זה אוטו מלא, אין סיכה להכניס, הכל מלא בחבילות, יוצא לצדיקים בכל רחבי הארץ, מחכים להם, וזה האוטו השני. גם כן אני קורא לפתוח את הדלת, בטוח שאני אוכל לסגור. גם בפגז, שלושה רכבים, ברוך השם, יוצאים מפוצצים. הקרטונים האחרונים עכשיו מנסים למצוא להם מקום, ואנחנו יוצאים לדרך בעזרת השם, סייעתא דשמיא, ברוך השם, איזה יופי, מספרים מפותחים, כל קטן וכל אחד.
Let's go.
Trying to save neshamot, the price that's on the line is much, much more dear. Why? It's eternity. It's not just a few dollars. And the reality is that you cannot waste any time. You can't afford to.
Let's go. Let's go.
Simply focusing as much of your energy as you possibly can on people that are interested in getting closer to Hashem. Don't waste your time dealing with Christian missionaries. Don't waste your time dealing with people that are anti-Torah. Don't waste your time with people that are atheists. Don't waste your time with people that are openly homosexual and are enemies of Hashem. Don't waste your time with people that are vulgar and disgusting and simply do not want to change. Don't waste your time with people that have an ego bigger than this room. Don't waste your time with them. Why? Because there are too many people that are more humble, that are at a position of their life where they realize they need to change. There are too many people that are interested in the more significant and more purposeful life. Too many people like that. Go to them. Why? Because they're much easier to get them on board. Just, this guy already wants to get on board. Woo! Woo!
Let's go.
Simply focusing as much of your energy as you possibly can on people that are interested in getting closer to Hashem. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your time.
Let's go.